Hi, everybody. Before I begin, I just want to say to all the Muslim students who celebrated this Eid this weekend, I hope you had a wonderful Eid celebration and end to Ramadan. Now, you should have finished your due now, so I just want to do a quick plug. That show that the clip came from, Dating Around on Netflix, I highly recommend it. It's very beautifully done, and it really does a good job of showing you what dating life in New York City can be like. The good, the bad, as you saw in that clip, the ugly as well. That guy was extremely rude to Gurki. So yeah, definitely check out the show if you're looking for something to watch. Now, what we're going to talk about today in this video and then another video that you're going to watch separately is just getting to know the different types of banks that are out there. Now, I want to make this very clear. I know from your answers that some of you already have bank accounts. Also, some of you are looking to create a bank account. So this lesson is for both of you. Remember, for those who have bank accounts, um, that bank account was probably opened by your parents when you were a little kid, or maybe even recently. But at the end of the day, banking has to be your own decision. So when you're listening to this, it doesn't mean you have to switch your bank. It's just you should get to know your bank. And if that bank doesn't meet your needs, then maybe you might want to switch your bank. For example, my parents opened a bank account for me when I was really young, and I kept that bank account all the way up until college. But then when I moved to New York City, that bank did not have branches in New York City, so I had to get my own bank account at a new bank. So, like I said, even if you have a bank account, this information is still valuable and will still help you make your own decisions at some point in the future. Now, I want to make this very clear before we start. Banks are not your friends. I know there's the rule in business, the customer is always right and put the customers first, but remember, at the end of the day, banks are a business. It's a business that needs to survive. The only way they will be able to survive is by bringing more money in than is going out. Meaning, when you ask for a bank for a loan, like a car loan or a house loan, the interest rate that they charge you is always going to be a lot more than the interest rate they will give you for your bank account. So, like I said, think of banking like dating. When you're going on dates, you need to think of what you want first, and does this person that I'm going on the date with check off a lot of those things on my list, or is, like we saw in the video, this relationship not going to work out? So I'm going to go over the different types of banks that are out there for you. And then in the next video, I'll show you how to navigate a bank website so that you feel confident to do this stuff on your own. So where we're going to start, and just follow my mouse, is we're going to start with international. So HSBC is an example of an international bank. It started in London and Hong Kong, China, because the British owned Hong Kong for a long time. And when you look at the map here, you can see that HSBC has banking locations all over the world. Now, what's the benefit of that? Well, when I went to London for the first time years ago, because I had an HSBC account, I was able to go to an HSBC ATM in London and withdraw money without being charged any fees. Oftentimes, when you travel, a lot of these financial institutions charge what's called a foreign transaction fee, meaning if, let's say, I'm part of a small bank in the United States, but I go travel in the Caribbean and that bank doesn't have a location there, when I withdraw money, they'll charge me a fee for a withdrawal, and usually these fees are pretty expensive. So the benefit of an international bank is that if you're a person who likes to travel, chances are then that bank will have a branch where you're traveling to, and you'll be able to get money without having to be charged any fees like that. On the con side, international banks are very large, so they're not going to so much care about your $500 that you're depositing. The customers who put millions of dollars into these banks will care more about them than you. Now, the next type of bank is what we call a national bank. National banks mean that it's a bank that has branches across the country. So if you look at Wells Fargo here, right, you could see all these dots. These are the different locations that Wells Fargo has banks located. So the point is, if let's say I travel to California from New York City, then yeah, there's going to be a Wells Fargo there, and again, I can use their ATMs and withdraw money without paying any large ATM fees or anything like that. Chase would be another example of a national bank, or Bank of America. Again, the point is they have more locations across the country. I mean, as you can see here, Wells Fargo has the most. Chase definitely has a lot of banking locations around major cities, but if you look at the heart of the country, Chase isn't really represented. Meaning, if let's say I traveled to Montana, which from this map it doesn't look like Chase is present in Montana at all, it means if I try to do any banking out there, I might have to pay extra fees to withdraw money. Sometimes these banks have partnerships with banks in the area, like maybe Chase has a partnership with a bank in Montana, and I would be able to use their ATMs without being charged a fee, but you really have to do your research. So if you plan on traveling, not so much outside the United States, but you're going to be doing a lot of traveling within the United States, then maybe a national bank is what you want because they're convenient. Next, we have what's called regional banks. So what makes them regional banks is that they're not located across the country. They're really confined to specific regions. So a bank like TD Bank, for example, that bank started in Canada, and if you notice, it has the most branches in the Northeast and then also along the East Coast. But it's not in California, it's not in Oregon, it's not in Texas, etc. Now, TD Bank says they call themselves America's most convenient bank. Why? Well, TD Bank is open 7 days a week. So most banks are open Monday through Friday. Sometimes they're open on Saturdays, like early in the morning, but not the same hours. But TD Bank, if you want to go to the bank on a Sunday, TD Bank is open. So, TD Bank might be something you might consider if you want convenience of being able to go to a bank any day of the week. Next, we have are what called local banks. So, local banks are really located within your community, meaning they don't have branches outside the area you live. So, Apple Bank, for example, named after the Big Apple, that's a bank that has banks throughout New York City. But if you were to travel to upstate New York, you wouldn't find any Apple banks. Now, what's the benefit of a bank like Apple Bank or any local bank? Well, because they're smaller, they usually care more about the customer. Because again, Chase is around the country, and it's, even has locations outside the country. So why do they care about you, right? Apple, on the other hand, or other local banks, again, they care a little more about the customer because they don't have as many customers across the country. So you might be able to find better interest rates there. And like I said, if you don't travel outside of New York City a lot, well, then you'll have easy access to going to Apple banks around the city. But like I said, if you move to California, then you're not going to find an Apple bank there. Next, we have what's called online banks. So as the name implies, these banks exist entirely online. So the benefit of online banks is they usually offer better interest rates than the other banks. Usually their interest rates are a little higher. What's the problem with online banks is, well, like I said, there's no building that you can really go to often to do the banking. Now, that being said, there are things you can do. So if you look on this web page, these are the different ways that you can deposit money into an online bank. So one option is, and again, this is going to vary with each bank, so you need to find out how each online bank works to know what to do. So some of them, for example, like Ally, which is the one I'm showing you, they will allow you to transfer money from an account that you have into their account. You can do it electronically. So what does that mean? It means if you have a bank account with Chase already, then you can open up a bank account at Ally by transferring money from your Chase account to your Ally. account. Another way to put money in online banks is to buy a money order. So in other words, you go to your post office and then you ask for a money order. So let's say I want a $50 money order. I give the post office $50, they give me the money order, and then I deposit the money order. The only problem with that though is sometimes money orders have fees. So it's like you're paying a fee to put your money in something, which to me doesn't make sense, but for some people they might not care. And then a third way is some of these online banks have relationships with certain ATM networks, like the ATM machines that you will see at a bank or, a bodega, although you won't find the ATMs you're looking for at a bodega, if that makes sense. So what this means is, like, you might, if they have a partnership with a certain ATM branch, like Capital One, then you can go to their ATMs and deposit the money into there, and then it will deposit it into your online account. So there are ways to get the money into the online bank. It's just it's a little more complicated than going to Bank of America on the corner and doing it there. But like I said, um, online banks do offer higher interest rates. Now, the next series of banks are a little more interesting. So even though I wrote Islamic banking here, don't be fooled by it, because Islamic banking, you do not have to be Muslim to be a part of these banks. So in certain religions, charging interest is considered a sin. In Islam, they call it riba. So for example, the idea of you put your money in a bank and then the bank charges you interest or pays you interest, again, that's considered a sin in some cultures. Even in the Catholic Church, charging interest was considered a sin for centuries. Now, like any religion, right, all religions are diverse. People practice them differently. So there are some Muslims who believe it's a sin and they choose a bank that like reflects that, and then other Muslims, they put their money in HSBC or Wells Fargo, right? So it's like any religion, people practice things like differently based on what they believe. But what makes Islamic banking different is that when it comes to getting loans, you're not charged interest. So for example, if I get a $30,000 loan from Wells Fargo up here, Wells Fargo is going to charge me interest. So for example, by the time I pay them back, I'm not paying them back just 30,000. I'm paying them maybe 40,000 at the end of the day because of the interest rate. Because remember, the bank wants to make money. So if they loan me money, then they will charge money for me to pay it back. Muslim banks, if I... Sorry, there's a siren going by. Okay. Muslim banks, if I borrow 30,000 from them, then I pay back 30,000. So Muslim banks are becoming very popular, especially with non-Muslims, because you can borrow money and do your banking without getting charged the interest fees that other banks would. So like I said, I just want to understand, if you're a Muslim who wants to do banking that follows uh, the Sharia laws, then that would be your option. But then also too, if you're non-Muslim, you can also participate in Islamic banking. And finally, we have what's called BIPOC. So BIPOC basically means Black, Indigenous, or people of color owned. So, for example, there are banks that are owned by black people. Carver Federal Savings, for example, this is a bank that started in Harlem, I believe back in the 1940s. It's a black-owned bank. There's several black-owned banks down south. So for people who, for example, want to support black businesses, uh, this is an option for you too. It's a way to support your community and to support your people rather than giving your money to other groups of people who might not necessarily represent your interests. Some of you might have seen the bank called, I think it's called Popular Bank. Popular Bank, for example, it began in Puerto Rico. So there are banks that are actually owned by specific, groups of people who represent those interests. So that might, be something that some of you might be interested in. And then the final type of bank is what we call a credit union. So a credit union is a bank, but usually with credit unions, you have to join them. It's kind of like a membership. So for example, in the city, Municipal Credit Union, this is a bank that members of people who work in the city for the city might be a part of. So what I mean by membership is usually with credit unions, there's a criteria membership that you have to meet in order to join. So for example, some of your parents, if they work for the city, they might actually be a part of the municipal credit union because that's a requirement that you need to work for a city agency. Sometimes credit unions, as part of their requirements, don't just come down to, oh, you have to work for this organization. Like they do allow people to join who aren't workers of that organization, but you still have to meet certain criteria to become a member. This one down here, the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union. So this was started by mainly Puerto Ricans, I believe, in the Lower East Side, because what happened was the bank that was originally there shut down, and it left the community without a bank. So the people got together and they formed their own bank. And I'm not sure what the membership requirements, but this is Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union is an example of a credit union, but then also BIPPOC because it is literally owned by members of the community. So these are your different types of banking options, whether it's a BIPOC, a credit union. But like I said, you have to base it on what you matter the most. So like I said, if you're a person who loves to travel, right? Maybe an international bank is what you are looking for. But if you're a person who likes the convenience of a bank that's open 7 days a week and is, mainly located in your area, maybe a regional bank. But if you're a person who likes higher interest rates, maybe an online bank or a local bank is the better way to go. And like I said, if you follow certain religious traditions or you want a bank that doesn't do shady things and really tries to live by certain ethical standards, then, like I said, things like Islamic banking, and these are two examples, La Riba and Bank of Whittier, that could be an option for you, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim. Also, some banks, like the large ones, also have branches within them. So I think J.P. Morgan also has a branch that follows Islamic Sharia banking rules. So I hope this helps. And like I said, see it as dating. Always date around. See which offers you the best rates and what matches the criteria that you selected in step 2 of the handout. Okay guys, I'll see you in a few minutes for the final video.